Happy Thursday, everyone. Happy holidays. Merry Christmas. Come on into the virtual room. We are so excited and delighted that you are making time on this Thursday morning to be with us for this very special episode of A Pastor and a Therapist. Of course, I am a pastor, Pastor Byron Benton, here in North Charleston, South Carolina, where I pastor the great church of Mount Moriah Missionary Baptist Church. And I am joined with a therapist, and I'll pass it over to her to introduce herself.
Good Thursday morning. Happy holidays. My name's Dr. Fredrica, and I am the therapist of the A Pastor and a Therapist podcast. We thank you for joining us today. We know that this can be an extremely difficult time for persons, and this is kind of like a year-end review reflection to celebrate the life of those who have transitioned, those with whom we are not in relationship with anymore through loss, maybe not due to death. So we want to encourage you now, if you don't have, grab your candle, grab your flashlight, grab your cell phone that you can turn on at the appropriate time, and welcome.
Yeah. As we get ready to jump into things, we want to remind you that in this setting, while we hope this is fruitful and encouraging and helpful for you, that this is not actual therapy. You aren't receiving therapy in this space, but we do hope that it's meaningful and that it's a blessing to you. Today, we're talking about love and life and grief, remembrance, right? As Dr. Fredrica mentioned, and this holiday season is usually filled for so many of us with many mixed emotions, the feel good of good memories, but also the longing of loved ones that are no longer with us at the capacity in which they were in the past. So we want to start out today by just defining grief, by getting an understanding of what is grief. And then we'll begin to talk through what we do with that and have a moment where we pay homage and respect and remember our loved ones. All right. So let's jump into things. What is grief? Well, grief, my brother, my sister, my friend, is a normal response, emphasis on normal, to a loss of something significant. We grieve any major change that happens in our lives. That includes a family member who has transitioned or a relationship that has changed. May not be the relationship that the other person is deceased. It may be that the nature of your relationship is no longer what it was. You're no longer married, or maybe something happened in the marriage and technically you are still married, but the marriage is not the same as it was before whatever event happened. That creates grief. Even if you relocate from one place to another, right? That's grief. We call it homesickness. But if you're spending Christmas in a brand new place for the very first time, you may have a number of feelings that are associated with grief. It's the process that helps us adapt to the changes that come with loss. It's an intense personal and individual process, emphasis on personal and individual. We can go through the exact same thing, but we experience it differently in our process. We can know how we both feel. We both lost a loved one, right? We're going through a tremendous amount of grief in our church right now with the just sheer number of people who have transitioned over the last couple of weeks. But each of us, even if we're part of the same household, we're both grieving the same parent, right? Can go through that process differently. It is a healthy but painful human response. We often associate pain with not being healthy or good or right, but the pain of grief is a part of the process of going through. It is healthy to grieve. Once again, I'm going to say that one more time. Somebody may need to hear that. It is healthy to go through a process of grief. All right. I'm going to pass it over to Dr. Fredrica.
So then it's healthy to go through grief. It's normal to go through grief. And then here are some of the reactions. Sometimes we may have had a loved one to transition and we don't know necessarily if we're grieving or not. The most popular way that people know if they're grieving is through tears. So if they're crying, it's like, okay, I'm experiencing this, I'm going through grief. But that's not it. So there are some emotional symptoms that you may experience, such as shock, denial. You may become angry. Like that's a real part of the grief journey for some. You may have anxiety, right? You may become depressed. And what might that look like? It may be that you're not getting up in the morning. You're not wanting to go to work. You're not wanting to go to church. You're not wanting to go to a holiday dinner. You're not wanting to do your normal routine. But then there's also loneliness that you may experience. Some of you who are watching now, someone who you lived with. It could have been a roommate, could have been a pet, it could have been a partner that's no longer in your life. Consequently, you may be experiencing some loneliness. You may also experience glimmers of hope. And what do we mean by that? A person has transitioned. You hoped and believed that they would live. They did not. And as a result of that, your hope has been diminished because of this loss. It could also be glimmer of hope of a relationship because you have prayed, you thought, you fasted that a relationship would last, only to find that someone has served you with papers for separation or divorce. And so you're grieving the loss of being in a relationship with your partner during the holidays or just in general. There's also guilt for some people that comes with a response to grief, guilt that perhaps your loved one asked you to come visit and you didn't go. And as a result of that, you're feeling guilty now that that person has transitioned. Physical symptoms that occur might be sleeplessness. So at night, it's difficult. You're tossing and turning. You may be sad. You may have weight loss or gain. You may also become tearful. And here, I just want to encourage you that if you find yourself crying because you're remembering the love of someone who's no longer here with you, then it's okay to cry. Not to feel that you have to hide that, right? Whether you are male or female, you may be tired, right? Some persons, you may have been a caregiver and you're just tired because one, you're tired because you were providing care, but two, you're also tired from being up at night and grieving the loss. Your stomach might become upset. You may have dreams or nightmares. So your loved one who transitioned, you may have a dream about that person, but there may also be nightmares. And then you may find difficulty concentrating. So these are some of the natural, normal reactions to grief. While I'm here, we want to encourage you to feel free to drop in the chat, drop in the social if you're watching on YouTube or if you are on social media or in the webinar platform, to share your comments with us if you have questions. Are these feelings normal? How long do they last? Pastor Byron is going to talk to us about that.
Yes, the answer to the question is they are normal. And here's what's so tricky about them. They can come in waves. I remember when I was younger and my grandmother had passed away. 2 years after she passed away, I was thinking about her and I broke down in tears, crying profusely, and went to a particular adult. And they said, "What's wrong? What's wrong?" And I uttered the words gaga, and they stopped me and said, "That happened 2 years ago. You should be over that." Well, that's not how grief works. It may be sometimes that for one day or another, you just have an intense rush of emotions. My mother, to this day, there are certain days where she'll say, "Today, I really miss mom." That's okay. And only that. It's normal. These symptoms are normal, although not every person will experience them, not every symptom at least. And that's why we have to be careful that we don't look at other people because they're grieving different than we're grieving, as if there's something wrong with them or something wrong or abnormal with us. Everything that we've talked about thus far are normal ways of grief. The grieving period varies from person to person according to each situation. And it may be brief or it may last for years. I have one other story I'll tell you real quickly about that. We've had a number of family members who have experienced dementia and then passed away, and everybody experienced that grief differently. Some when the person actually passed away, it was a lot harder for them than when they had dementia. For others, when they were experiencing them with dementia, they grieved so heavily that there was more sense of relief when they passed away. And there's room for all of those experiences. They will be different for each person. It does not mean that you love the person any more or less. Going back to what Dr. Fredrica said, sometimes we may feel guilty because we're like, oh, I feel like I should be grieving more. I remember when one of my family members passed away and my brother kept saying, I feel bad because I'm not crying. I feel like I should feel sad. And then all of a sudden, halfway through the funeral, he just breaks down crying. And I said, well, do you feel better now? No. That's how it is, everybody. There's just no rule book to this that says, okay, you should be feeling this way now, or you should be feeling here now. We want to dispel the shoulding on people. No should is here. You have permission to be. There are 4 key facts about grief that we just want to make sure you know about. The way out of grief is through it. Right? You can't go around it. You can't go over it. You can't go under it. You got to go through it. The only way through grief is through it. All right? So you don't just get over it. You don't get over losing a loved one or a cherished relationship. You go through it. All right? You go through it. The very worst kind of grief is yours. The worst kind of grief is your grief. And grief is hard work. There is no such thing as easy grief. All grief is difficult work. It's hard work. Effective grief, though, effective grief work is not done alone. Effective grief work. And here's one quick reason why that is. The wound that you experience was a loss of something. And therefore, typically, we need some sense of community and others to be with us as we think of it in terms of this. If you broke your arm, would you try to just heal it all by yourself? If you got in some kind of accident, God forbid, would you go, insurance companies, I got it. Chiropractors, I got it. I can do my own adjustments. No. You're feeling the way you feel a lot of times in connection to other things and how that has played out. And it is in our connection with other things and people, typically, in which we will find healing. And so we go to the doctor, we go to the chiropractor, we go to the insurance agent, we go to all these entities because they specialize in walking with us to help us achieve a place of wholeness. And as we journey on, we go through a cycle of grief. And Dr. Fredrica is going to jump in, also probably help on what I may not have communicated well, but then talk to us about how do we cycle through? What is this cycle all about of grief? You're muted, Dr. Fredrica. But what you're saying, I could tell was good. You're saying some good stuff.
Thank you for that, Pastor Byron. So we're going to go about this grief cycle, right? So there is a cycle that we go through when we experience grief. So as Pastor Byron said, our grief journey is ours. It's individual. Well, the cycle that we go through, it's not necessarily in this order for everyone. You might go through the cycle I'm referencing, and as a result of that, find yourself at stage 3 first, and then go back to 1, right? So denial. This cannot be real. This person has transitioned. And let me say that denial is not just for sudden accidents or killings or death. Denial is even if you have anticipated someone is going to die. you never know how you're going to feel until it actually happens. So denial is one of the first cycle of phase, if you will, of the grief cycle. Next is anger. You may ask, God, why me? Why am I going through this? Why did you take my mom? Why did you take my husband? And these are all normal responses when we've lost someone that we've loved through death or through divorce. Bargaining. Okay, we may find this to be true in the instance of someone who's been sick, or maybe someone who has dementia, where we find ourselves bargaining and saying, if I do this, you'll do that. Okay, God, if in fact I'll go to church more, I will spend time with my family more, I will walk my dog more, I will love on my cat more. If you do this, this is what I'll do. Another is depression, feeling defeated. Like this is really over. There's nothing else I can do. I tried really hard. And, there's so many in our society today that are providing care for their loved ones. And one of the things I want to say here is that when your loved one transitions, when they die, you have done all that you can do, that we encourage you to be able to sit in that, grieve, but don't feel defeated in that, oh, I didn't do enough, because there's only but so much we can do. Acceptance that this happened, if it's that you're walking this journey, that it's going to happen, but that death is a part of life that we all must go through and experience. These stages don't necessarily, as I mentioned, progress in order. Certainly, there are several different models of the grief stages and cycles. And so, in our brief time today, we're just highlighting a few. These are not all exhaustive. Not everyone will experience every stage. And as we prepare for the holidays, we really want people to be mindful and to be respectful, that if you have a loved one who's transitioned recently or to come, and you're celebrating the holiday together, you're around family, that you don't judge a person because they didn't cry, or as Pastor Byron talked about, his brother not crying and feeling some kind of way, that it's an individual process and journey. And so it won't show the same for each person. And then, as I've already mentioned, there's fluidity in the stages. Also being aware that someone may have transitioned in September, but it's not until December that you're actually going through the cycle of grief and these stages. So know that it happens at different times. And that's okay. With that being said, we've talked about grief from the perspective of the loss, a death. We also realize that there are those of you who may be watching now or on the replay, that you are grieving the loss of a relationship. And Pastor Byron is going to walk us through loss at this time.
Yeah. So, as mentioned before, we grieve any major change in our lives, any major change, even losing your job, um, even going to a new job and you were glad to leave the prior job. There still may be grief from just the major change. But also, there are these changes that are intangible to others. And these are the really tricky ones, because I'm grieving, but there was not this death notice that was put out to where people know that I have this loss, right? I may be grieving because I'm getting older and I realize I've lost my youth. Can't do what I used to be able to do. I went up for a jump shot and my back fell on the ground. And I can't do that anymore, right? Even there are certain things that some people deal with easier than others, right? My hair's getting grayer, or I'm losing my hair, right? And we get around family members and they love to point out how you're changing. Ooh, you've gained weight. Ooh, you too skinny. Ooh, you lost all your hair, right? And so all these things become an emphasis, but they may be a trigger to a deeper reality of loss that you're experiencing, that you're still really trying to process through, right? loss of financial independence. Now I've moved back in. Oh my Lord, I've been independent my whole life. Now all of a sudden my children, I'm depending on my children in a way that I've never had to depend on them. I feel like I've lost who I am in being able to be as independent as I used to. A loss of power, right? All of that goes into this. And a valued environment. Something has happened. I'm no longer, again, maybe I relocated. I don't have my church family that I had anymore. Or maybe something happened within my friend group. And now my friend group is no longer the same friend group. We will never be the same. Or maybe I'm no longer a part of that friend group. All these are different types of loss. What it's important to do is to sort through and define your loss. What is the major change for you that you have or that you are experiencing so that you can name that? At times we may just have feelings and we don't really understand, where is this coming from? Why am I feeling this way? What change has happened that may be causing me to grieve in this way? It's important to sit down and define, well, this major life event has shifted, and I'm probably having to process through, and I'm going through and seeing some of the stages of grief that Dr. Fredrica talked about. Since I'm seeing that in my behavior, let me see, is there a loss that I can attach to it? And then you'll be able to define it, because there are so many things that we could attribute to grief. Because again, any major change in our lives is a loss of some sort, even when it's something that we really wanted. Let me give you one more good example. Your child gets married. And it could be to a great person that you want them to get married to. They're moving on and having their own life and all that. Yay! There's grief. There's grief. They're independent. They graduated. They're gainfully employed. Yay! Grief. Right? So here's the bottom line before I pass it back to Dr. Fredrica. It's inevitable. Even when things work out the best case scenario that we're hoping for, grief is tied to it. I'm excited that my children are doing well. My smallest child, I got teary-eyed the other day, Dr. Fredrica. She jumped out of the car. She's 5 now. She jumps out of the car, and I watch her walk into her school. She's high-fiving everybody. I mean, she's just a big girl, goes up, hugs her friend, and it hit me. Oh my God, I don't have a baby anymore. This is my last. For 10 years, I've had a baby of some sort. I've had a little baby girl. It hit me. Oh my God. She's independent. She's doing her thing. I'm so proud of her. I'm sad because I ain't got no babies no more. And they're not going to be any more babies unless the Lord say something else. So all that, y'all, it's okay. It's a part of that grief. All right. And so it's important that we own it. Take it away, Dr. Fredrica.
All right. Before we go there, we had a question. Why do we sometimes feel like we burden others with our grief? That's a question that has come from Jaden. Oftentimes the reason we feel that is because we're often uncomfortable in our own grief. And so because we're uncomfortable with it and it is a heaviness that we have, we automatically assume that we are placing what we're feeling on someone else. It is also a way that we can defend against really leaning into what we're feeling. So we have this heaviness. We know that something is not right with us. And so we say to ourselves, I'm going to hold it. I don't want to give it to someone else. When in reality, often we don't want to deal with it, right? And so it's not about the other person. It really is about us, because oftentimes family members and friends will say, I'm here for you. I want to support you. And we don't take it up, not because we don't want to give it to them. We don't want to take it up because we know if I call Pastor Byron to talk about this loss, then I now have to talk about it, right? If I hold it and say, Pastor Byron is like, Dr. Fredrica, I see that you're having some problems over there. Like, what's going on? Talk to me. No, I don't want to burden you. In some way, it's like, I don't want to harm you. I don't want to hurt you. When really it's, I don't want to deal with it. I don't want to cope with it. So that's often why we are in places where we feel like we don't want to burden someone else. And what I would encourage you and I would say to you is that when someone says to you and you have history with this person and they want to be there for you, allow them to be there for you, right? And if it's burdensome to them, they'll tell you. So don't feel like you have to, that somebody won't say to you, that's too much for me. So again, those are reasons why. Pastor Byron, is there anything you want to offer?
I just want to add one piece too is, and maybe this applies today, maybe it doesn't, but also be conscious of, are you like me? And it is more comfortable for you to be there for others. Mm-hmm. Like that, like it's natural. Oh, you'll be there for others. Like, oh, let me help carry your burden. Talk about your grief. I'm here to sit with you, right? But when the shoe's on the other foot, right? Because we're so used to being the ones that are in the other seat that we're incredibly uncomfortable when the shoe's on the other foot, having to be vulnerable in that way and allow you to sow back into my life the way that I have sown into yours. But in order for us to really be good at helping others, we need to become really good at being helped as well.
Mm-hmm. That is very, very true. So we hope that has answered your question there. And so what we want to do right now is take a moment to ask that you grab your candle if you have it there with you. I know Pastor Byron has been teasing me all morning with his candle and I think more than anything, he wants to light the candle. But we are preparing now to transition into our candlelight service. If we were in person, we would do this differently, but it's abbreviated for today. And so we hope whether you're watching now on the replay, this might be something that you would in fact participate in. So if you have your candles there with you, go ahead and take them at this moment. I will kind of lead us into a prelude. And then at the appropriate time, Pastor Byron will actually have us to light our candle. This candle can be represented of one person, multiple people. But one of the other things that it is very important is that we speak the names of our loved ones. And so we offer to you, if we were in person, we would tell you or ask you to say names aloud if you wanted to. And so in this moment, we want you to look for the chat box, the comment box, based on where you're joining us from. And even if it's in the replay, you are invited to share the name of your loved one that you want to honor in this moment. So go ahead and get ready, grab your candle, get to the keyboard if you want to plug their names in, or not, you can speak their names, okay? So we're going to get started now. We are here to remember those we loved. At the core of our being, we are aware that a relationship we value has ended. Our hearts ache, our tears flow. We feel a deep, tender wound because someone precious is no longer with us. We grieve because of that physical absence, but we also rejoice to have known that love. We are not alone in our grief, our tears, and our memories. We reach out to one another with love, with understanding, and with hope. Those we loved who have died unite us. So if you are at home with someone, if you're next to someone who's joining with you now, or you want to do this later, I encourage you to reach out to that person that may be in your physical presence at this time or later, and let them know that you reach out to them in love and understanding and with hope. Those we loved who have died, they unite us. Your pain becomes my pain. Your joy becomes my joy. Your hope is my hope. Some of us are far along in our grieving. Others still experience grief so fresh and intensely painful that we feel helpless and see no hope. Some of us have found our faith to be a source of strength. Some of us are angry. Some feel with guilt or in deep depression. Others glow with inner peace. Whatever pain we bring to this gathering, it is pain we all share. Even as we struggle to rebuild our lives, we reach out to one another in love. We will share joy as well as pain. We will share peace of mind as well as anger, and we will share faith as well as doubt. We will help one another to grow as well as to grieve. What we want to do now is to help you know that you are not alone. So we want you to take a moment. If you're by yourself, just hug yourself. Like you see this little girl in this image, that I am not alone. Say that to yourself, because you are not. You are not alone. Even on this platform today, you may not see people who are with you, but there are others who are here with you. So at this point, we want you to take a look at, get your candle, and Pastor Byron is going to begin to show you as he has his candle. He is going to show you, you want to take your candle, you want to light that candle. And at this time, Pastor Byron, I turn it over to you.
For those that have your candle, we invite you to light it. If you do not have a candle and you have your phone, you can turn on your light. Or you can do whatever gesture for you is symbolic of remembering your loved one. Feel free in this moment to whisper or to call out the name of those who you are remembering. I want to invite you to remember, though they are no longer physically present, the love and impact they have brought to your life endures, because love endures forever. Take a moment and sit in silence with your light that is shining bright. And as you look at the light, reflect on the memories of love you shared with this or these persons. And in your own way, I invite you to express your own sentiments of gratitude for the pleasant memories that you're able to hold on to. As names appear in the chat, feel free, if you desire, to call out those names as we as a community walk with one another. Scripture reminds us in John's Gospel, chapter 11, verse 25. Jesus said, I am the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me will live, even though they die. And whoever lives by believing in me will never die. Our loved ones, for those who walk according to the Christian faith, are forever with the Lord. And we have hope in the promise that we have in him. May we say a prayer together. Let us pray. Most holy and awesome God, we come to you with our candles lit, remembering that you are the light of the world, and that light shines brightest in darkness. Lord, our grief can feel so dark and encompassing at times. Feelings as though it is a black hole in our hearts, driving all life into it. But Lord, in you, we have a hope that allows us to grieve with hope. And so, Father, we ask for a great comfort today for each of us. A comfort that only comes to those who are courageous enough to go through the process of grief. Remind us of your presence that will never leave us or forsake us. Bring peace to each and every heart that far surpasses the understanding of our pain. As these candles glow, remind us that your light shines even in our darkest moments, and help us to honor those we have lost by living lives of love and grace. Wrap us in your arms and give us strength for this day and for the many days to come. In Christ's name we pray. Amen. May your light shine. Amen.
Amen. We want to thank you for all of you who shared, whether you spoke their names audibly, whether you placed the loved one's name in the chat or comment box, whether you are watching this on the replay later. We encourage those who are watching, share with others. You never know how it may bring some comfort and hope to them. And it may not be today, but it may be in 2 weeks. That we want you to know you are not alone, and that there are people here who are willing to support you as we walk through this journey. We also want to talk about, well, what's next? So I've lost a loved one, I've lost a relationship. What do I do? How do I move forward? Well, what's next is we have to walk through a season, and that particular season that we're going to be walking through, as you will see momentarily, is creating new traditions. Now, let me say here that I am aware that some persons, they don't like the idea of when you say creating new traditions. And Pastor Byron is going to talk with us about what does that actually mean. And I'm just going to share here briefly, like, a new tradition for me actually was when my husband transitioned on his first birthday, after, because he loved birthday cake and fried chicken. I had a birthday cake and had her put on there, "Happy Heavenly Birthday, Teddy." And she looked at me like, surely she just did not tell me to put on this birthday cake, "Happy Heavenly Birthday." So she looked at me. I said, "Yes, ma'am. Happy Heavenly Birthday, Teddy." And my family, we got together and we had ice cream and cake and his fried chicken in his honor. So Pastor Byron is going to highlight some of that for us now. Creating new tradition. What's that, Pastor?
Yeah. So one, a tradition in itself, for things that we do that brings fond memories of loved ones. So it's a way we do to celebrate, acknowledge that grief, but acknowledge it in a way that can invite more celebration, similar to what you just talked about. It's like, look, I'm going to celebrate it. You may not get it, you may not understand it, but this cake ain't for you. You got to create it. So give me what I came to get, right? And I commend you on how you own that, knowing that some others may not get it, right? So a tradition is figuring out, what does that look like for you? Because all of us, in one way or another, start building traditions, even if it was unintentional. And once someone's no longer there, that tradition is broken. It can't be done the way it was. So now, how do we make new meaning, right, out of the past broken tradition? Well, that becomes a new tradition. Now, the Christmas holidays, some of those traditions may be loaded, because what happens when not only was it a Christmas tradition, but I lost my loved one around the holidays. So now I've got a double whammy, because the holidays, some of the normal holiday things are actually a trigger of remembering what it was like when we had to go to the hospital and when we got the call, etc. So it's beginning to figure out, okay, how do we make sure that this person is present? For some, it may be passing on a tradition. In our household, of course, many of you know, we lost my mother-in-law, my wife's mother, 4 years ago to ovarian cancer. She was only 64 years old. Growing up, Yaz's mother made cookies with her. It was something that they did. So do you know a tradition now that happens in our household? My wife makes cookies with our daughters. It is a tradition now. Her position in the tradition has shifted. It is no longer her mother making cookies with her. It is now she, as the mother's, making cookies with the children. So now what also can become a part of the tradition? Sharing with the children who their grandmother was. Beginning to, because now you're owning your experience in it, right? This process can be painful because it's a reminder of, I used to do this with my mother. So now I'm going to educate and teach you who your grandmother was. She is now living and present in this tradition that's now being passed on to you. That's making the tradition a little bit of the same, but making some nuance to it so that you can own and be present with it. And in our household, when we're in Greensboro, like we were recently, we make trips graveside. My grandmother's favorite song, 23rd Psalm, we're going to recite that when we go graveside, right there as a family. It brings fond memories back of those things. I have been known, this may seem a little bit weird, but we're not judging. We listen and we don't judge, right? That's where we are. I tend to like to drive by the houses where my loved ones used to live. I don't go in, I don't go knocking and like, hey, my grandmama used to live here. I don't go to that extent, but I drive past them. I want to see and remember. I'm going to go slower. I'm going to sit for a moment. I actually do that with a number of places that meant near and dear things to me in different periods of my life. I like to be present. It's how I am with those things. And so I make those drive-bys a part of my own personal and private tradition. Sometimes I'll do that with myself. Sometimes I want to do that with someone else and tell them why this place was so significant to me. What happened here? You can light candles just as we just did. You can have pictures that you bring out. You can set up different types of ways of paying homage. You can take a moment on Christmas morning and say, hey, family, we're just going to pray together and lift up the names of all those that we missed today. It really is, the sky is the limit on what you can do. The key is defining it so that you know, what should I hold on to and what do I need to let go of? What brings me joy in the midst of my sorrow, right? Because we're not saying that it won't be any sorrow. I'm not saying when I go graveside that sometimes my heart isn't a little heavy or anything like that, or go to these places, but there's some joy. There's a joy ingredient in there that makes it new life giving to me. So how do you pour new life? Right? The tradition is to give new life. If the tradition is dead, it's an unhelpful tradition. That's being traditional instead of having a tradition, right? The tradition must create life in some kind of way for you. All right. So what happens to those traditions when we lose a loved one? They become too painful to bear. Holidays, birthdays, anniversaries, picnics, vacations. What once was joy now only magnifies our loss. So should we throw away all those traditions that used to bring such joy to our hearts? Not necessarily. We have to figure out, how do we engage in these things in a way that cause new life to come? The last piece I'll say about this, because this comes from a very much Christian standpoint, is that for us, death always gives way to new life.
Mhm.
So the idea is, how do I acknowledge and grieve this death while embracing new life, new tradition? That is the embodiment of the communion table for us. Literally, each and every Sunday that we partake in communion, we are remembering the grief, the death, burial, and new life, resurrection that comes. It is a grief moment, and it is recognizing that only new life is achieved through grief and death, despair of some sort. And so I'm owning both and giving my way to new tradition. All right. Does that make sense, Dr. Fredrica?
It does. I mean, I think we had Linda told us in the chat there, and others feel free to comment, a new tradition. Like I asked people to share, what new tradition would you do or have you done? And so singing carols and tree decorating with the family is a great one.
Volunteer.
Yeah,
Volunteer
volunteer. That's
to do
right.
so. I'm going to do this in honor of them.
That's right. That is right. So again, anything that you can think of that encourages you, inspires you to honor. I remember a cousin of mine, Christopher. He was my first cousin to die, and we were young, but he wanted to go see Lord of the Rings. I didn't know anything about the Lord of the Rings, but he was looking forward to go see it. So the movie came out right after he transitioned. So I went to see the Lord of the Rings, and I really enjoyed it, but I would have never gone had it not been to honor him. So that's another example.
I got to tell you this story because my first cousin, Roy Benton, who passed away, he was 44 years old, had an aneurysm. He's more like a brother to me. It was deeply painful. And you know, one of the things we did to honor him, his brothers and my brother, we all did the Tough Mudder.
What's that?
The Tough Mudder is it's an obstacle course like marathon, half marathon type situation. I mean, it is crazy. We trained for it for a year just to do it and to do it in honor of Roy. And there was this moment. I definitely then was not the best swimmer, and they have this walk the plank where you have to literally jump off a 12-foot high dive plank into water in which a hole basically in the ground. They put water in there. The person the prior year had died, and so now they had a scuba person over there just in case somebody needs some help. I walked all the way up there, Dr. Fredrica, and I looked down and said, "I ain't doing this." And I turned around to walk back. But my first cousin, he was on the other plank, and he kept saying, "No, do it, Byron. Do it. I got you. Do it, Byron." And I thought of Roy, and I said, I got to do this. And so I just, without thinking, I said 1, 2, 3, and I just jumped down, and we both went down with my cousin. And all that was a part of how we were just dealing with our grief. I'm like, it's a memory now and a part of the tradition I will never forget. And so this was the same uncle who passed away recently, Roy's father. And so I was back with those cousins again, and all these become new memories, new meaning making that we have out of the pain. I had forgotten about that story till you just brought up the first cousin story. I said, man, this is, yeah.
That's a beautiful story and a way to honor your cousin. I also, what came to mind before we go into coping here is that one that may seem unconventional to some. Earlier, we talked about the grief cycle and the process we go through, and we talked about anger, but we also talked about feeling guilty. I would encourage you that if you had a loved one to die or transition, and you're feeling some kind of guilt because maybe there's something that you did actually do, then maybe what you could do in honor of your loved one is to actually go to counseling, to actually work through the guilt and the grief that you feel and forgiveness. And even though that loved one is no longer here with you, there are things that you can do. And so maybe one is that you write that loved one a letter and acknowledge what you did, what you said. And while they can't physically say, "I'm sorry," It is amazing the possibility of how you may change as a result. And so maybe what you're doing is starting anew, that this loved one and this transition taught you the importance of not taking one day for granted. And you want to start that. What is something else we can do? And as we close out today's session, we want to make sure we give you some tips for coping. So we talked about grief, we talked about loss, we've gone through a candlelight ceremony, we talked about creating new traditions. But guess what? Pastor Byron talked earlier about this grief journey is one we all must go through. But guess what? To go through it, we need some coping. We need some tools to go through this process. Coping is a normal part of living with the loss. It's the struggle you go through every day to meet your own needs and the demands of a new situation. The struggle is to cope well rather than in unhealthy and destructive ways. And one way is to acknowledge that right now at a loss. Maybe you feel like you're walking through a fog. And for those of you who are listening and watching now or later, if you are a therapist, if you're a minister, if you hold space for persons going through grief, guess what? You have to give yourself grace. The same way you give persons who are with you grace, you must do the same. Seek support of family and friends. And family and friends may be those by blood, and it may be persons on your job. Seek assistance from a mental health professional. I talked about that a moment ago. Participate in a support group, one in which I'm most familiar with because I used to be a part of facilitating it, is Grief Share. It's offered nationwide. It's griefshare.org. And so if you participate in Grief Share, that is a 13-week group and it provides support. There's others groups that are available to you. So I encourage you to look for those. Take a walk, get out and smell the fresh air is a way in which you can cope. You also can listen to music. What is a song that uplifts you, that lets you know you're not alone? We don't want you to listen to down music that's going to cause you to stay where you are, but uplifting music. Meditate on the word, meditate on scripture, depending upon your faith tradition, whatever you may listen to, or you may find a sermon on YouTube. Just search for grief to help you. There may be stanzas or words that you can meditate on. Do something for someone else. You know, Pastor Byron said earlier, volunteering. So in honor of this person, I'm going to go to the soup kitchen on Christmas morning. So maybe your grandmother was the one who hosted Christmas. Your family may have decided for Christmas this year, we don't want to go to grandmother's house. It's too fresh for us. But instead, we want to feed the homeless. That's what we want to do in honor of our grandmother. Or we're going to cook in honor of our grandmother. So maybe your grandmother liked fine china like mine did. And like I do, I like eating off plates. But after a while, your family gets to a place, at least in mine, where they're like, they're always like, Fredrica, because I do a lot of the cooking for Christmas at my mom's, and both sides of my family come. Fredrica, we can do like some Christmas paper plates. We don't have to cook. I mean, we don't have to clean up afterwards. I'm like, So for me, in honor of my grandmother who set a table every time we ate, that is something I do in honor of her. Take enough time to grieve. So express your feelings, share how you're feeling, take care of your physical health through exercise and a healthy diet. When you have a loved one and they may have died and had some health challenges, think about that from a health perspective and from a family perspective. So if you know your loved one was struggling with certain areas, or you were a caregiver and it was difficult for you to transfer that person, then you might want to think, do I want to eat this brownie today? Do I want to put myself in the best physical health possible? So if someone has to care for me, that it will be easier for them. So these are some of the things that you can do. Tips to assist you through this process: plan to keep busy. Holidays are approaching. Some of you that is something that you're not looking forward to, go ahead and look on your calendar. Spend time with family members and friends. Practice relaxation exercises. One of the things I would encourage you to do is go to a dollar store, go to whatever store you want to go to, Target, and get some bubbles. If you have children or grandchildren, they probably have bubbles around the house. Get a bottle of bubbles and just focus on blowing in that bottle and creating bubbles. You will be surprised how that can help you relieve stress. It can also help you to calm down, and get in touch with your breath. So it would be amazing to know, if I just blow bubbles, how that might become relaxing for you. So these are some tips on what you can do. Pastor Byron, do you have any that we didn't highlight?
Yeah, go play golf. No.
Mm.
So one of the things that I've already booked it. My dad, my brother, and we've already got a tee time for us to go and play golf together. Interesting story behind that. My brother years ago gave up playing golf because he got so frustrated. Now that he's older, he started playing again just so he can play with dad and I. And it's become something now of a bit of our own little tradition. So there may be some things, some fun game activities that you have, board games. Those are a hoot. Get Taboo out, get Simon out, other things of that nature. Even if you play tic-tac-toe, things that really get you engaging, that are fun, checkers. Many of these, as we get older, we played these games when we were younger. Jacks, marbles. It doesn't have to be complicated. If you're like me and my household, it's time to break out them spades. It's time to do it. Right? Which for me, again, that's a part of our family tradition. Every holiday, I watched my uncle and my mom and my aunts play spades. Right? Now, my uncle and one of my aunts, that uncle aunt, they're the ones who are gone. They're no longer there. I learned and wanted to learn how to play spades because of hearing my uncle talk trash and how much fun they were having. And that's just become a part of what we do. So we're going to make time. We're going to play spades. Somebody's showing up. I'm getting somebody, right? So that we can have fun and have a good time and continue to do that. Again, these are just examples. You may have other things that now are coming to your mind of, you know what? I remember we used to do this and that was fun. Or I would love to start trying to do X, Y, and Z. Make that fun. If you're in a season where cooking and stuff is just too much of a challenge, you just don't have that energy, that's okay. You don't have to cook. You can order in, you can go out. You may decide that, hey, maybe as a family, we're going to do a destination Christmas this year. Let's all meet up at Myrtle Beach. Or let's all meet up, down here, or even go down for a day trip. If you're blessed to live like where we do in Charleston, you just drive on over to the water for a day and drive on back, right? For others, you may be a little further away, but there's something that you can do that can be a close getaway, that they're not breaking the bank and is that expensive, to where you can find some space that is a plug-in for you and not a take away all my life and energy out of you type of experience. So I just want to encourage everybody, figure out and define it for you, what it is that would be life-giving and fun and something that you can do as a family that also, you may not even thought about it before, is a way of helping you to cope. Oh, one more thing that came to mind. There may be specific television shows that do it for you. I got to see Charlie Brown Christmas. I just got to. I don't know what it is. Like I gotta hear them say Christmas time is here, blah blah blah. Like I gotta hear that song. Like another song I gotta hear. It is not Christmas until I hear the Temptations sing Silent Night. I gotta hear it. Like I've got to hear it. It gives me all kinds of feel goods in my soul. So make sure those things happen. Sit with yourself, remember what they are, and make sure that if it's life-giving to you, that you incorporate it as a part of your coping.
Thank you very much, Pastor Byron. And before we go, I do want to acknowledge that there are some of us who did not have healthy, loving memories as a child or as an adult in the holiday. Some of you, your families may be torn apart because of loss. and because of grief. And we want to encourage you. We want to support you and to know that if you find yourself in a situation where you didn't have loving memories, that we want you to know that you too can still find hope in the midst of this time. And so you can do that by, and as a family, you may be at odds because of how things happen. Well, you may decide this year you're going to take a break. So we want you to know it's okay to say, as a family, we're not going to gather together. We're going to stay with our immediates, or we're going to separate, and we'll see what we'll do next year. And that's okay, right? It is okay. Don't force something if you don't have to. So from us, Pastor Byron and myself, we wish all of you a blessed holiday season. May your life, may the life of your loved one be one that you cherish. May we remember those who have transitioned. May we not take one day for granted. And if it is indeed for us, myself and Pastor Byron, God's will, because that is our faith tradition, we hope to see you the second Thursday of the new year. Can y'all believe it? 2025. If you've missed some of our previous recordings, please go back. You can see them on YouTube at A Pastor and a Therapist. Remember to blow out your candles if you're going to be leaving. Be safe. Pastor Byron, anything you want to say as we close?
Now, just thank everyone for tuning in. I pray that this was helpful for you. Please share it with anyone who you feel it may be helpful for, and may God's peace be with each and every one of you.
All right. Take care. We look forward to seeing you in the new year. Be blessed. Bye-bye.